Rain lashed against the window panes, creating a rhythmic yet chaotic symphony that echoed through the empty room. Each drop seemed to carry the weight of the city's history, a reminder of the countless souls who had once sought refuge within these walls. Perfect, thought Arthur, just perfect. The weather matched his mood, a turbulent mix of excitement and trepidation. He had always dreamed of living in London, but the reality was far more daunting than he had anticipated. Another grey London day to greet his arrival. The city seemed to be cloaked in a perpetual state of melancholy, its beauty hidden beneath layers of fog and drizzle, yet there was something undeniably captivating about it. He wrestled a battered suitcase through the narrow doorway of the old Bloomsbury flat. The suitcase, a relic from his childhood, had seen better days, much like the flat itself. The hallway was narrow, the walls adorned with peeling wallpaper that hinted at a bygone era. Dusty sunlight, struggling to penetrate grime-coated windows, illuminated a cramped room. The furniture, covered in a thick layer of dust, seemed to have been untouched for years. It was a far cry from the modern apartments he had seen in brochures. "Charming," he muttered, more to himself than the empty room. The word hung in the air, a stark contrast to the reality before him, but he knew he had to make the best of it. After all, this was his new home. It had its quirks, this place. But the rent was cheap, and a starving student couldn't be picky. The flat had character, a certain charm that modern buildings lacked. It was a place with stories, and Arthur was eager to add his own to its history. He unpacked quickly, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the flat. Each item he pulled from the suitcase was a piece of his past, a reminder of the life he had left behind. He hoped that in this new city he could build something better. A walk, he decided, needed to find the nearest chippy anyway. The streets of London were a maze, each turn revealing a new facet of the city's character. He felt a sense of adventure, a thrill that came with the unknown. Arthur grabbed his worn leather jacket, the scent of damp wool filling his nostrils. The jacket was a gift from his father, a symbol of resilience and strength. It was comforting, a piece of home in a foreign land. As he stepped out, the last rays of sunlight surrendered to the encroaching night. The city transformed, its streets coming alive with the hum of evening activity. Arthur felt a sense of belonging, a feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, he had made the right choice. The chippy was bustling, filled with the comforting aroma of vinegar and frying oil. The clatter of plates and the hum of conversation created a lively atmosphere that seemed to momentarily lift Arthur's spirits. He watched as the golden-brown fish sizzled in the fryer, the bubbles dancing around it. The sight and smell were a welcome distraction from the unease that had been gnawing at him since he moved to London. Arthur, stomach full of chips and cod, felt a sliver of optimism pierce the gloom. Maybe, just maybe, he could find some semblance of happiness here. The meal had been delicious, and for a brief moment he allowed himself to believe that things were looking up. As he walked back to his flat, the cityscape of London at dusk painted a picturesque scene. The lights twinkled like stars, and the streets were alive with the energy of the evening. Maybe London wouldn't be so bad after all. Returning to the flat, however, his newfound cheer evaporated. The building's dimly lit corridors and the eerie silence that greeted him at the door were a stark contrast to the vibrant city outside. He fumbled for the light switch, his fingers brushing against the cold, unyielding wall. The switch clicked, but the light that flickered to life was weak and unsteady. The flickering bulb did little to dispel the shadows that clung to the corners of the room. The darkness seemed almost alive, shifting and moving just beyond the reach of the feeble light, and then he saw it. A door where there hadn't been one before. His heart skipped a beat as he stared at the impossible sight. The wall that had always been bare now held a dark, heavy oak door set into the wall opposite his bed. It was absurd, impossible. He had lived here for months, and there had never been a door there. A dark, heavy oak door set into the wall opposite his bed. It was absurd, impossible. He had lived here for months, and there had never been a door there. The wood looked ancient, worn, as if it had been there for centuries. Arthur blinked, convinced it was a trick of the light. He rubbed his eyes, hoping that when he opened them again, The door would be gone, and the wall would be as it always had been. But when he opened his eyes, the door remained, solid and undeniably real. He took a hesitant step forward, his mind racing with questions. What was behind it? How had it appeared? And most importantly, should he open it? Sleep that night was a fleeting visitor. Arthur lay in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. The room was dimly lit, shadows dancing on the walls, creating an eerie atmosphere that only heightened his sense of unease. He turned over, trying to find a comfortable position, but his mind was too restless, too consumed by the thoughts of the impossible door. Arthur lay in bed, eyes fixed on the impossible door. It was a door that had appeared out of nowhere, in a place where no door should be. It was as if it had materialized from the depths of his own imagination, yet there it was, solid and real. It seemed to pulse with an energy he couldn't define, a silent beckoning that set his teeth on edge. The door glowed faintly, a soft, eerie light emanating from its edges, casting strange shadows in the room. It was as if the door itself was alive, breathing, waiting for him to make a move. Logic screamed at him, demanded he ignore it. His rational mind told him that it was impossible. The doors don't just appear out of nowhere. But the more he tried to ignore it, the louder the whispers of curiosity became, gnawing at his thoughts, refusing to be silenced. But curiosity, a relentless beast, whispered tempting possibilities. Where did it lead? What secrets did it hold? The questions swirled in his mind, each one more tantalizing than the last. He couldn't help but wonder what lay beyond that dark surface. What mysteries awaited him on the other side? What lay beyond its dark surface? The door seemed to promise answers to questions he hadn't even thought to ask. It was a mystery wrapped in an enigma, and the more he thought about it, the more he felt compelled to uncover its secrets. He rose before dawn, drawn to the door like a moth to a flickering flame. The early morning light cast long shadows in the room, but his focus was solely on the door. He felt a strange mix of fear and excitement, a sense of anticipation that he couldn't shake off. Running his hand over its rough surface, he felt an inexplicable chill run down his spine. The wood was old and weathered, as if it had been there for centuries, waiting for someone to discover it. The texture was rough under his fingers, adding to the sense of mystery. The brass doorknob, cold beneath his fingers, seemed to thrum with a life of its own. It was tarnished and worn, yet it felt strangely alive, as if it was aware of his presence. He hesitated for a moment, his hand hovering over the doorknob, unsure of what to do next. He hesitated, fear a bitter taste in his mouth. What if opening the door unleashed something terrible? What if it led to a place he could never return from? The possibilities were endless, and each one more terrifying than the last. What if he didn't like what he found? The fear of the unknown gripped him, but so did the insatiable curiosity. He knew he had to make a choice, to either walk away and never know, or to take the risk and uncover the truth. The decision weighed heavily on him, but he knew there was only one way to find out. The decision once made brought a strange sense of calm. Arthur took a deep breath, the air thick with anticipation. He gripped the cold brass doorknob, its intricate carvings digging into his palm. Click. The sound, sharp and metallic, echoed in the silence of the room. He pushed the door inward, the hinges groaning in protest. A rush of cool air, fragrant with night-blooming jasmine, washed over him. He stepped through the doorway, and the world as he knew it ceased to exist. Gone was the cramped, dusty flat. Arthur found himself standing on a cobblestone street, bathed in the ethereal glow of a full moon. Elegant Georgian buildings, their facades washed in silver, lined the street. Gaslights flickered, casting dancing shadows on the glistening cobblestones. It was London, but not the London he knew. This London was alive, vibrant, pulsing with an energy that hummed beneath his skin. He walked, mesmerized, through streets teeming with life. People in elegant attire, laughing and talking, thronged the pavements. Carriages drawn by sleek horses clattered over the cobblestones. The air vibrated with the music of street musicians, their melodies both familiar and hauntingly different. He was captivated, lost in this fantastical dreamscape, when a voice smooth as velvet broke through his reverie. "Good evening," it said, a hint of amusement in its tone. Arthur turned to see a woman, her face framed by a stylish cloche hat, her lips painted a vibrant crimson. Her eyes, the colour of polished emeralds, sparkled with an unsettling knowing. "Lost, are you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Arthur stammered, unsure how to respond. How could he explain that he didn't belong here, that he had stumbled through a door that shouldn't exist? The woman, as if reading his thoughts, chuckled softly. "Don't worry, dear boy," she said, taking his arm. "There's time for explanations later." She led him through a labyrinth of winding streets, each turn revealing a new wonder. They passed bustling jazz clubs, their windows radiating a warm golden light. Arthur caught glimpses of dancers, their movements fluid and graceful, their faces flushed with joy. The woman, her grip on his arm surprisingly strong, navigated the crowds with ease. Finally they reached a small, secluded square. A magnificent clock tower dominated the space, its ornate face glowing in the moonlight. As Arthur watched, mesmerized, the clock began to chime. 2 booming tolls reverberated through the square, each strike seeming to vibrate within his very bones. The final chime faded into silence, and just as suddenly as it began, the magic evaporated. The vibrant cityscape dissolved, replaced by the familiar drabness of his Bloomsbury flat. The woman, the music, the laughter, all gone, leaving only a lingering trace of jasmine in the air. Arthur stood, disoriented, before the oak door. It was closed now, as if it had never opened. He reached out a trembling hand to touch it, half expecting it to vanish beneath his fingertips. But the door remained, solid and real. He was left with more questions than answers. Was it all a dream? A hallucination? Or was there a world beyond that door? A world that existed only when the clock struck 2? He couldn't shake the feeling that he had only scratched the surface of a profound mystery. The woman's words echoed in his mind. "There's time for explanations later, later." The word hung in the air, a promise and a threat. Arthur knew he couldn't ignore the door. It called to him, beckoned him to explore its secrets. He glanced at his watch. It was almost midnight. He had a decision to make. The night, after all, was still young. And somewhere in a city bathed in moonlight, a clock was about to strike 2.